Not long ago, I watched a video from Mortismal Gaming where he talked about his ideal length for games, and it got me thinking a lot about what my ideal length for a game is. Because the preference he gave is fundamentally different than mine. And that makes sense. His channel focuses a lot on big CRPGs. He has a video talking about his top 5 Baldur's Gate 3 playthroughs, which insinuates that there are more than 5. Point is, he consumes games differently than I do. I'm the type who likes to play things once and then move on. So I thought it might be fun to talk about game length from the perspective of someone who doesn't play those kinds of games as often, who doesn't look for as long of games. So that's what I'm gonna do here. Obviously, there are a lot of factors that change how long I think a game should be, like its genre, or whether it is an indie or AAA game. So what I'm gonna put forward is not the length that I think all games should strive to be, but rather the range that I find to most regularly lead to me walking away with a positive feeling about a title. Nothing is hard and fast, but I think this is a pretty good estimate. And my guess is it's probably a fair bit shorter than the average person's range for this sort of thing. For me, the perfect length of a game is around 6 to 8 hours, at least to beat the main campaign. This amount of time usually is enough to dive into somewhat complex systems and create a lasting memory of the experience without it running the risk of getting stale. Most likely, it will take a few sessions to beat, but if you are really feeling obsessed, you could theoretically do it in one long sitting. Now, this is just how I feel about the length of a main campaign. I do like when there is more optional content, assuming it is actually worthwhile content, that you can engage with if you are really enjoying it. It's less about a game only being 6 to 8 hours and more about there being an off-ramp at that point where you can be done playing if you so choose and still feel like you've had a full and satisfying experience. So some examples of titles that fall into this category are Pizza Tower, which I think to get to the top of the tower will probably take about 6 hours, but you can spend dozens and dozens of hours trying to get better times and of course chase after the P rank for all the levels. Citizen Sleeper is like this as well, as there is replay value to see how different things can go, but also there have been essentially free patches that add content to the post-game. I think my total playtime is around 12 hours, but I'll be honest, I'm really happy that I felt like the game ended before then, because that stuff was like, oh, I really want to stay in this world, so I'm gonna keep playing instead of, I feel like I have to keep going. It's a small mental distinction, but it helps me at least. Burgeist, which is one of my recent favorites, does this as well, where you can theoretically get a tower up to the highest part pretty early on, probably in 4 to 5 hours, although it will definitely be challenging without the upgrades you get from the other towers. My guess is it realistically will take most people around 7 hours to get strong enough to do it. But if you do spend time doing the side quests with the other towers, you can get way more playtime. That is all a lot of fun. Of course, Animal Well marketed itself on this idea where the main campaign actually probably only is around 5 hours, but depending on the different layers you engage with, that can be pumped up to 10 hours and even well beyond that for the most complicated stuff in the game. There also is Sable, which really takes the idea of an open world to its truest form by letting you choose when you think it is right to end the game because Sable has found her correct path in life. In my playthrough, I think the option to end the game probably came around the 6-hour mark, and I played for another 12 until I hit a spot where I was like, yeah, this is when I want to end the game. Undertale is like this as well. I imagine most people on their first playthrough will get the neutral ending, at least I did, and because I did, that means most people must have, right? It seems easy to accidentally fall into the neutral ending, is my point. So if you liked it and really enjoyed the game, then there are 2 other endings to explore. Granted, maybe you shouldn't explore both of them, but they are there if you really liked it, so there's more to do. I beat the neutral ending and then I did the pacifist run, and I enjoyed that. I thought that was a good experience. I think that I could have stopped at the neutral ending and felt satisfied, but I definitely got more out of it for doing more. As for AAA games, there's Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, where every minute of it is pretty much pure cinema and pure action. And also, there's a ton of reason to replay it to get higher ranks, and it's also just very fun. There's Titanfall 2, which has some extremely creative ideas for its campaign and uses both the first-person shooter aspects and the mech shooting in really cool ways. and not for a second does it even think about overstaying its welcome. There's Spec Ops: The Line, which certainly feels much longer than the 6 or so hours it will take to beat, but because of that is able to have a massive impact in a short amount of time. There's also Portal 2, which pushes the puzzles of the first game in new and exciting ways and is able to explore them in depth without you ever feeling like they're getting stale. I'd also say the Uncharted games generally fall into this range as well. Maybe a little bit on the longer end and there's less optional fun stuff to do. But still, it's that right length of being long enough to feel substantial, but not too long to overstay its welcome. Now, of course, I think there's a fair question of why do you like short games so much? And part of this just comes from a preference I have of playing lots of different types of games. I think it's cool to get different experiences. And admittedly, since this has become my job, having different experiences gives me value in multiple different ways. Not only do I get to enjoy it as a player, but I also have more things to talk about in potential videos I make on the main channel or here. Admittedly, this length feels a lot easier to justify for indie games, mostly because of price. Not that I expect a $60 game to be twice as long as a $30 game, but I do expect it to be more complex in scale, which typically will lead to it being longer. I imagine most people feel similarly, that they're okay with indie games being shorter but want AAA ones to be more substantial. And of course, if you're playing a big RPG, you probably want that to be a long game. If Baldur's Gate 3 would only take 6 to 8 hours, then you really lose out on what the game can all accomplish. Honestly, I've personally played like 30 hours of Baldur's Gate 3 and I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of what it is or what I can do in it. So again, it all depends, but I'd imagine for people where this isn't a job, where they don't necessarily have the ability to justify trying out a lot of different games in the way I am able to. They just want one thing that they can play that lasts a long time, that they can play an hour, 2 hours every night and not run out of stuff to do for a good long while. And that's super understandable. But short games allow for a unique focus that some mid-range titles just really don't. And again, while there are no hard and fast rules, and there are plenty of studios that make good mid-range games and good long games, it's a little too common for games to aim to be bigger than they need to be and to become bloated because of it. Now, with all of that said, I am kind of a liar, because while I do believe in all of this, when I look at my favorite games, almost none of them fall into this range. I haven't really done my favorite games of all time list on this channel or the main channel, although I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with them. I was, however, able to find a list I posted a few years back, not really of my concrete favorite games, but I guess what I was vibing on during that time. It's hard because these things do kind of change day to day, and there are just so many games that it's easy to let one slip off the list and forget about it. To focus on just the top 5, Outer Wilds is about a 15 to 25 hour game depending on how quickly you figure stuff out. Breath of the Wild will probably take about 40 to 50 hours for most people. You definitely can beat the main story way quicker than that, but I doubt most people would do it that quickly on their first try. Hollow Knight is around 25 to 30 hours. Dark Souls is around 30 to 40. And of the top 5, the only one that gets close to my range is Shadow of the Colossus, which is about 8 to 10. Expanding it out to the full 25, the vast majority are in the 20 to 30 hour range. The only ones that really fall into that 6 to 8 hour space are Return of the Obra Dinn, Shovel Knight, and Getting Over It. Journey and Edith Finch are both shorter than that, so I don't think they count either. So yeah, it's like 3 to 4 games, if you include Shadow of the Colossus, fit in that range. And frankly, I don't know that those games would stay on my actual list. Honestly, I think at this point, Elden Ring would probably be on this list. Also, 2 games I played really recently would be 2. Those being Cyberpunk 2077, which is probably about 20 to 30 hours to beat the main campaign, but can go up to like 60 if you do a lot of stuff and also the DLC. And then also Claire Obscure Expedition 33, which, I mean, I 100%ed it, so I liked it a lot. Those games are definitely in my top 25 now. and probably close to top 10 if I'm being honest. So yeah, I think what this shows me is for a game to become really important to me, it generally takes it being longer. I guess though, as most things I play aren't going to become my favorites, I am looking for something more in that 6 to 8 hour range so that I never really get fatigued of what I'm playing. And if those games that I just think are pretty good end up going much beyond that, usually I'm way more likely to get tired of it and probably look at it a little more negatively. Obviously, there is something to all different types of experiences. I just really love the feeling of getting into a game and getting obsessed with it for a short period of time, and even maybe playing through it in one sitting. That's what I did with Citizen Sleeper, and it was one of my favorite experiences I've had in a good while. I just couldn't stop playing the game. And while you could say, hey, wouldn't it have been nice to have that experience for even longer, I felt really good by the end of it. And to see it all through in just one day meant something more. I remember that day so vividly, and I like that. I like that a lot. Anyway, these are just my thoughts, which is, yeah, kind of a contrasting idea. But I think what I'd say is with average games that I don't necessarily expect to become my next favorite, I'm looking for something on the shorter end. Something that if I'm not vibing with it hugely, I can still beat it pretty quickly before getting fatigued by it. And if I do find myself vibing with it a lot, that it has optional stuff for me to dig my teeth into. I'd be very curious though to hear how all of you feel. Are you on the short game end of things, or do you want to get every minute of playtime you can out of every game you buy? Or more likely, are you somewhere in the between? Anyway, have a good one. Bye.